I think we can probably go ahead and get started. So my session is called Just Whip It, and it's named after a cookbook that Nancy Sando wrote. And we'll talk a little bit about Nancy and her cookbook, but it is a session we did at the family gathering that I've adapted to online and got some fun videos to show. But I wanted to start with just a tiny disclaimer. I'm an occupational therapist and not a licensed dietitian or nutritionist, so this is not nutrition advice. What I really like to focus on is how to use adaptive techniques to improve independence in eating, especially around limited jaw mobility. And my whole goal today is really that I hope that I can reduce the anxiety around eating and limited jaw mobility. So that is, kind of what we're going to talk about, different techniques that community members have made. All of this was developed in conjunction with a few of our FOP community members, which you'll see throughout the presentation. So if you have specific nutrition related questions, those are best directed towards your FOP expert or your primary care physician. I am not the person for nutrition advice. There's my little disclaimer. So we are going to start with a short poll for the folks who are here about alternative eating methods. So we want to know if you have to, or your loved one with FOP has to adapt their food at all to have any sort of alternate eating methods. So if everybody can answer our poll, GW, I know you're driving, so you can holler if you can't respond.
Um, I've just had to barely modify her eating. Like the doctor don't want her. I think it's oranges or whatnot. So, but other than that, she's more vegetarian, vegan, almost.
Okay, wonderful. And we'll leave this up for a second. We've got a few people joining us last minute. And it looks like we're kind of half and half. Some people have to modify their food, some people don't. And Paolo, who just joined us, we're just doing a little bit of a survey on if you have to modify your food. All right, so we've got a couple of yeses and a couple of nos, which feels pretty common in the FOP community. Some people have jaw limitations and some people don't. So we will stop sharing our poll here. So kind of different ways that I've learned from the FOP community about alternative eating methods. You can steam your food to make it softer, cutting things up into small bites. The two things we're going to focus on today, flattening and whipping, and blending, which is similar, and then liquid calories. So protein shakes, smoothies, those sorts of things. And if anybody has something I haven't shared, feel free to throw it in the chat and Hope can share it with us. Well, we want to start with flattening food. So this idea came from Candace and Samson. Samson is a little boy who has FOP, and his favorite food was cinnamon rolls. And after his jaw locked, obviously cinnamon rolls are big, doughy things, and he wasn't able to eat them. And his mom, Candace, came up with a great idea of using a panini press to flatten the cinnamon rolls so he could still eat them. All of the things we share today are in the Ability Toolbox guidebook. So we'll share the PowerPoint and you can click the link and it will take you to the guidebook. The videos are also on the guidebook. We're going to head back here. So that's Samson. These are his cinnamon rolls. On the next slide, we're going to share a video of Candace talking about how she makes the cinnamon rolls. I have the volume all the way turned up. She speaks a little quietly, so you may need to max your volume out for her. So we're going to listen to Candace and watch her make some cinnamon rolls.
Hey guys, it's Candace Hickson here, mom to Samson who has FOP, and I am going to show you guys how we make cinnamon rolls. So Samson always enjoyed cinnamon rolls before his jaw locked up, and then once that got kind of tight, it was hard for him to eat them. So really anything he enjoyed. So I kind of wanted to come up with a way where he could still eat them and enjoy them. So what I do is I get 2 pieces of parchment paper. I have a panini press and some melted butter and just a regular can of cinnamon rolls. And I will usually make the whole can or maybe even a couple cans and freeze them when they're done. So I'll start out with the cinnamon roll. I'll put it in the parchment paper and we'll roll it out real quick. And get it just as thin as I can without it falling apart. The parchment paper is just to keep the cinnamon roll from sticking to the roller and also keeps me from having to wash the roller. So we just roll that out, and then I will put some butter on the plates of the sandwich press just to keep it from sticking to the grill plates, and then I will peel the nice thin cinnamon roll, almost like a pancake, out of there, press it into the panini maker, and then just kind of press the top down. Mine gets hot, so I use a pot holder or towel. And I just do it on medium heat, a couple minutes per side, and then they come out looking like this. Here's a couple that I've already made, and then if he wants one fresh, I'll just ice it and he can eat it. He just picks it up and eats it. And then I will make several and then just layer parchment paper in between, and I can put them in a freezer safe bag or container, and they'll keep in the freezer for a couple weeks. And then we just save the icing from the package so that we can ice it when we need it. And you can even make your own icing using powdered sugar and water. It's super, super simple. Little vanilla extract also if you want to change the flavor, or almond extract. But it's super easy, and it has made Samson be able to enjoy cinnamon rolls even though his jaw is locked up.
So a big thanks to Candace for sharing how they flatten cinnamon rolls. Again, this is video is up on the Ability Toolbox guidebook, so something you can always access. It's on our YouTube channel as well. And I thought that that was a really neat idea, using a panini press to flatten food. So we are going to move into kind of the main thing that we did at the family gathering, was whipping food. And this idea came from Nancy Sando. You can see her over here in the corner, and she is one of the founding members of the IFOPA and lives with FOP in Michigan. And her jaw locked pretty early in her FOP experience, and she really missed the foods that she enjoyed. She said that she would often settle for a milkshake or a smoothie, but what she really wanted was a hamburger. And so she decided she was going to put it in a blender and see if she could eat it. And the first thing she ever whipped was a Whopper from Burger King. And now she whips all of her food and eats a full diet, and has even written a cookbook. And that's where our Just Whip It name comes from, is Nancy's cookbook, which is linked here and then again is on the Ability Toolbox. And she was a wealth of knowledge and sent us some videos and really worked with me on how to do it. So we're going to watch a little video of her caregiver whipping her lunch, and then we'll go into kind of a step-by-step explanation on how to whip food. a huge thank you to Nancy's caregiver for doing that. And if you could tell, that was a Jimmy John's sandwich. So Nancy eats everything, all sorts of food. It goes into her blender. And I think the biggest takeaway I got from watching them do this is when I think of whipped food or blended food, I think I'm going to be able to like drink it like out of a straw or through my cup. And it's really a more pureed consistency. And I think a lot of people who did this in person at the family gathering kind of found that their expectations and what happened were a little bit different. So we are going to, so what we're going to do in the video here is talk about whipping a hamburger. When you can refer back to these slides, these are the step-by-step instructions from Nancy's cookbook on how to whip a hamburger. A few things that I will touch on in the video is that the more you whip it, the finer it will get. So it's important to move slowly because you can over whip it and then it really will be liquidy. And also that it can get cold when you whip it because you're adding condiments, you're adding pickles, you're adding things. So having a microwave or some way to heat it up shortly after you whip it might be necessary. So I'm going to share a video of me following those instructions on the previous slide, whipping a hamburger. Hey everybody, so I want to show you a little demo on how to blend or whip a hamburger. If you have limited jaw mobility or your jaw is locked from FOP or you can't chew your food for some reason, blending or whipping food is a great way to eat a variety of foods, get different nutrients, and get protein. And I think the biggest misconception is that you're gonna put a hamburger in a blender and it's gonna be so smooth that you can eat it, with a straw, that you can sip it. And that is not what blending food does. I mean, I think you could get there if you over blended it, but really what we're trying to do is get a soft, pureed consistency that's gonna taste like your favorite foods. So right here, I have a hamburger that's already made and some additional toppings. One of the biggest tips I learned with blending food is that you only want to use a little bit of bread. So say you're blending a sandwich or a hamburger, you only want to use one of the buns. You don't want to put both buns in, it's gonna make it pretty gummy. So I'm gonna take this top bun off of my hamburger and rip it into small pieces, kind of throwing it in my blender here. So tiny pieces, they're gonna go in, and then you're gonna use, if you have a blender that has a pulse feature, that's what you're gonna wanna use. My blender is a little bit older, it doesn't have that, so I have it set on kind of a 4 out of 10. We're gonna start there. So you're gonna take this guy, put it on, make sure you put your top on, and then give it a little bit of a pulse or a whip. So I've kind of blended up my bread, and now I'm gonna add my meat, so my hamburger. And I went and got a McDonald's hamburger. It is already a little bit, has some condiments on it. So as you can see, it's got some pickles, some ketchup, and a little bit of cheese. That is what I like, that's what I like to eat, but you can use anything. Condiments are gonna be extremely important because it's what gives it moisture. So cutting it up, chopping it up. Obviously, if I was serving this for someone else, I would use a fork and a knife, but for my demo purposes, we all do things in our own kitchen, right? So pulling this into small bites. I'm gonna take a little bit of the second patty, this is a double. And I'm gonna throw in the pickles. Other things I have on my plate that I want to add in are some tomatoes. So I just grabbed some baby tomatoes, a little bit of lettuce. I like lettuce on my hamburgers, and a little bit of extra pickle. I'm a pickle person. So now I've got all of that, and then we're gonna re-blend it. So we're gonna go ahead and put this guy on, add my top, and again, small pulses to blend. You can see it's pretty chunky in there. I can show you. So it definitely needs some moisture. So I'm gonna take my top off, and I'm gonna add some ketchup. One thing that we did find when we did this in person at our IFOPA family gathering was that if you add a lot of a single condiment, like ketchup, it can be overpowering. So thinking about different condiments that you can use. Do you wanna use ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce, Heinz 57, A1 sauce, all of those things were suggested. I've also heard members of our community suggest a little bit of broth or jarred gravy. But I'm going to use a little bit of ketchup. I like ketchup. This is actually spicy ketchup. I'm going to throw a little bit in. I'm going to take my spoon, get it in there. I'm going to add a tiny bit more because I can already tell just from experience it's still a little dry because I'm going to want to whip it to my consistency. So I've got my ketchup in there, ready to go. And we're gonna pulse it a little bit more. So that is a really fine pureed consistency. So that is what I'm looking for. If you start this process and you have over whipped or over blended and it is starting to get soupy, put a little bit more bread in. So I could take more of my bun and put it in there. If you're doing something else, like a salad or a steamed vegetable, and it gets too whipped, you can always use a little bit of like croutons or chips or something like that, just to give it a tiny bit of breaded consistency. So this is my whipped hamburger. Okay, so that is my demo of whipping the hamburger. I'll be curious to see when we chat if there's anybody who has whipped it. Oh boy, playing it again. I don't need to hear my voice again. But we can just go back to the instructions here. And this is kind of what I did. I took the bun, I put it in the blender, and then we worked up from there. I think the biggest takeaway is that you want to go slow. We talked about that before I started the video, and that the condiments matter. So thinking about what you're going to use for condiments and then putting them in one at a time. When I talked to Nancy about what her whipping top tips are, adding something with a crunch or a texture. So for this hamburger we just whipped, we used the bread and we used a little bit of pickle. Having something to kind of break up that texture is important. For salads, she would use croutons or chips and anything that is kind of going to have a casserole consistency. Thinking something that you can add for a little bit of texture is going to help it not be soupy. The other thing she shared with me is that you can always add more moisture, but you can't take it out. So going really slowly with whatever condiment you're using is going to help you from having to not start all the way over. There are, additional ways, like I said, adding some bread, adding some more chips and crunch, but going slowly there. If you have a blender with a pulse feature, that is going to keep you from over whipping and over blending it. As you saw in the video, my blender does not have a pulse feature, so you don't have to have a fancy blender, but I just put it on a medium setting and went really slowly. And like we shared in the beginning, whipping can make the food cold, because as you saw, I started with a warm hamburger, but I was adding cold pickles and cold condiments. So once you're done whipping, it's going to be a little bit cold, and so putting it in the microwave for a few seconds to warm it back up before you eat it is advised. So before we talk about adaptive tools for eating, I wondered if anybody had any questions or comments. You can put it in the chat, or you can certainly unmute yourself and speak up. How did the
Melissa,
hamburger taste? Yeah.
Oh,
Kathleen. So the hamburger tasted great. It tastes just like a regular hamburger. That was, I think, the biggest takeaway from people that participated in this activity at the family gathering was that it actually tasted like a hamburger. I think the biggest caveat is it's going to taste a lot like whatever condiment you use. So making sure you like that condiment. We had some people who didn't, we did it in groups, and we had some folks who didn't love ketchup. And so as you saw, I put a lot of ketchup in there. And so it had like too much of a ketchupy taste for them. So thinking about what condiment you use will be important, but it really does taste just like whatever food you're blending. And I think that was the biggest surprise for me when I did it the first time, was that it tasted that way. Is there anybody else who has questions or comments that want to talk about kind of their alternative food experience or anything like that? Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about adaptive tools for eating. There are so many adaptive tools on the market and a lot of homemade extended tools that can help people with FOP. And we have them here in the Ability Toolbox.
Oh, Melissa, you might have to stop and restart your screen share because we can't see the Ability Toolbox when you go to
Thank
it.
you. I'm not sure what. All right. So here we are in the Ability Toolbox. And we have a variety of different adaptive plates and silverware, adaptive cups and straws, but I really wanted to talk about kind of the eating pieces here. Adaptive silverware is something that a lot of folks have used, and I found that there are a lot on the market that are bendable, which I felt like for someone with FOP could be very helpful. And you can find these here, but the first ones here, these are long and bendable. These are short and bendable. And then people have used a lot of different ways to extend. They make collapsible and extendable forks. And then other people have made their own using foam tubing or using a dowel, like you can see here. So extending and adapting your food if you don't want to buy something like that. And then Nancy is the one that showed me these silicone plates. This is what they use when they whip. As you can see, here's a picture of her whipped food in her silicone plate. She likes the silicone because it can go into the microwave and in the dishwasher, and also because it has these high sides. So with whipping, especially if you need a little bit of reinforcement, you're gonna want a high-sided bowl or plate. And we've got a few here. They make specific high-low plates and high-low bowls. All of the things we've shared today as terms of adaptive eating, whipping, and blending are all here in the Ability Toolbox. So there's our flattening food, here's our Just Whip It, and some links to some food processors that people in our community have used. The last thing I want to share that I think is so important on the Ability Toolbox is the Suggest a Tool feature. So if you come to the Ability Toolbox page, you hit Suggest a Tool, the only thing that's required here is your email, and if you can, and the tool you want to share. So you can share a tip, a home modification, a tool with me, and I can add it to the Ability Toolbox. So I know that you guys all probably have some really great ideas, and I would love to share them with the broader FOP community and get them in the Ability Toolbox. So coming here to the Suggest a Tool button can be very helpful.